in Clay County and Lawrence and Randolph that's around me over in Mississippi County. And so we travel the state, all of us do. You as legislators travel from your county to the state capital quite often. And so when I travel around, I want to know that there's a problem being taken care of for you, for me, for my family, and for all of the citizens of Arkansas. And that's why we bring these challenges to you and recognize the great importance and discussion and responsibility that's on your shoulders to make these decisions.
All right, any questions? If questions, Senator King.
So I talked about it a lot, and I go back to this thing, as somebody's been down there in the budget, and it comes back to money. We talk about we need beds and everything, it has to be money. You need money for misdemeanor justice, and I agree with all that. And this is what the frustration is with some of the county judges, not my county judges, because I go out and visit with them and the people. It comes back to the prioritizing the money of the legislature and the government. If we've been funded the same percentage, you know, you could use 1.8, we could designate 1.8 million for misdemeanor justice back for you if we were funded at the same percentage. And you have some of these newer legislators that don't understand that, and I didn't understand it when I first went in the budgeting process. But we have got to be funding more money that you send back down there that is inefficiently used in Little Rock. We need to be funding it back more to you. So whenever you talk with your legislators, you need to ask them, why are we not at the same percentage that we used to fund state and county turnback dollars? Because like I said, easily, you would get $1.8 million out of this last budget more for every county that you could use for misdemeanor judging, street repairs, whatever. That is the frustration I have seen from my 20 years, that we are not funding county governments back. We're shorting you guys, easily, because the cost of everything you're doing is going up. You know, the second thing is they need to be funding corrections. This is very important for legislators on the priority. We've got to be funding it back at 10%. We're in this problem because they have been underfunding corrections for years down there. As I said, if we funded corrections at 10% of the budget where we should be, just in the last 13, 14 years, corrections would have received $1.4 billion more. So I know I'm just saying that, I'm just telling you, I'm trying to get you guys more money to work with and get money back. They're trying to keep more of your money when you send it to Little Rock. So we can't solve this without money, and my biggest thing is too, let me give you another example. They show for fury in this situation, which is throwing out figures that are inconceivable, $156,000 per bed. They shut down the Calico Rock expansion. And that expansion of 525 beds would have been a lot less money, 200-something thousand per bed, that we could have done. But they did it to do this mega prison that's going to cost easily $400,000 to $800,000 per bed. So those are the things that we've got to do, and we have to look 5 years down the road to get your county turnback dollars. So your legislators need to be funding county turnback dollars back to 4.9% of the budget, where you get more money to solve these problems.
Thank you very much. We do understand more than you probably realize the problems you faced every day as county judges. I know I've chaired city, county, and local for 9 years, and I've seen a lot of these things come through. And I understand that you have to be good stewards with the tax dollars you have. But at the same time, we too have to be good stewards with the tax dollars of the people of the state of Arkansas. And we would like to see more of that come back to you. We've had a couple of bills this last session that was trying to bring more money back to the counties in the form of turnback funds. So we're with you. We really are. So thank you for being here today.
Senator Stubblefield, may I just say one thing? And Senator King, to what you said, I would much rather us get our state prisoners out of our county jails than ask for more money for the state prisoners that we're keeping. And we're glad that we increased to $40, but it still leaves, in Saline County, it leaves us $40 short of breaking even on taking care of these people. And so for the past almost 5 years now, we've been stuck at 40, but our expenses are not stuck at 40. So I would like to ask that that be taken into consideration, is we don't see realistically that anytime soon we're going to be with less than 38% of our jail filled with these people. And to the point, some of these jails have 50 open beds. Well, you can't make it up in bulk when you're losing $40 per. We're not looking for more, because there is a misnomer out there. We are making money. No, we're generating revenue that's making a loss for us.
Can you break down real quickly why it takes $85 a day to keep a prisoner?
Yeah, it's going to be closer to 95 this time next year, because our construction, $8.5 million that we didn't have, came from our rescue funds. You know, rescue funds couldn't expand a jail, so they go into revenue loss, and then magically we can use them to build the jail. And so that's what we're using those for. It is extreme. The cost of an egg has gone up, food's gone up, equipment goes up, our utilities per kilowatt hour have gone up. It's just like any other service line, they go up, and our employees pay goes up. You mentioned it earlier. We've got to compete with people that are paying more money than us. Everything goes up. Any pro forma at any service line, I haven't had one yet that we said, wow, we're able to save money year over year on this one. Jail is the same way. Inflation cost index is part of that. And if we could just keep up with our inflation cost index for what we are obligated wrongly to keep these state prisoners, that would be appreciated, I believe, by most counties.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thanks for being here today. All right, we have a few from the public, just to make a few public comments, statements. Adam Watson, you can come forward. State your name and who you're with.
My name's Adam Watson. I'm here for myself. I'm a resident of Franklin County branch, specifically, Senator. 1 second, let me grab my notes. So before we get into my comments, I do have just a quick note from our county judge, Ricky Bowman. Judge Bowman's father-in-law has been in hospice for some time and kind of took a downturn today. That prevented the judge from attending this evening, but he asked me briefly just to share his disappointment in not being able to speak to all of you in person. And he asked me to confirm that he voted against the resolution passed by the Judges Association a few weeks ago, and reaffirm that he still stands with the people of Franklin County in opposition to the currently proposed prison project. We certainly extend our deepest condolences to the Bowman family during this time and wish them the best through this situation. So on to my comments for today. So throughout the day, you've heard a lot of testimony about the need for a new prison, and I think there's some confusion that our side, being the opposition to this project, is equally opposed to new bed space and the relief for the issues that you've heard about today. As I referenced in my open letter to the county judges and the sheriffs, we aren't really here to argue that point. What we're here to argue is that this specific prison that is currently being planned will never be a successful carceral facility that alleviates either our overcrowding concerns or the county's budgetary concerns, nor will it address the need for additional beds per the prison projection, population projections you heard about earlier. This project has kind of been riddled with red flags since its inception. Similar projects around the country consistently come in over budget, behind schedule, and face major operational issues, many falling victim to the same pitfalls that we've pointed out with this project, despite theirs being much better positioned for success. Utah's new state correctional facility came in over 100% over budget, despite being just 9 miles from downtown Salt Lake City with access to a population of 1.26 million. It remains dangerously short-staffed. Alabama's already exhausted its entire allocated budget without even completing the first of 2 planned mega prison construction projects. South Dakota similarly just pulled the plug on a project very similar to Arkansas's after dumping $50 million into it, trying to force a site that just wasn't viable for the scope of their build. Now, to Senator Hester's point during session, we keenly understand that all prisons are different, just like all homes are different, and costs are going to vary. However, we have ADC documentation overlaying the exact footprint of Utah's troubled facility onto the Franklin County property, ostensibly as a facility to emulate in our state. If we're using a project that went $500 million over budget and still cannot be staffed as our guide, we aren't starting from a great place. We can also learn from our more immediate neighbors. Texas's Sunset Advisory Commission recently reported its recommendation that even in the face of extremely similar overcrowding issues in the state, Texas should not only stop building rural prisons, it should shut down the ones it's currently operating because it's a failed system. This concept of building massive rural carceral facilities has clearly failed and is not something we should strive to emulate. Over the course of our resistance to this project, we've consistently maintained that the facts matter, we've refrained from playing politics, and we've let the evidence speak for itself. On the contrary, we've witnessed state officials spin narratives that aren't supported by the facts. You've heard that months of expert research determined this to be the best location in the state for this project. In reality, the site was found online by a GIS summer intern, and it was under contract 3 weeks later. You've heard that the 864-page survey released by the governor's office indicates suitability of this site for this type of project. In reality, that survey indicates that the results are merely preliminary and necessitate further investigation. Meanwhile, simply drilling test wells on the property, something that should have been done before it was purchased, indicates that the property can only sustain, at best, 6% of the water needed to serve the prison. And as we sit here today, almost a year after state ownership, one of the most basic feasibility questions, where will water come from, still can't be answered. And this is even before we've earnestly broached subjects like power, wastewater, and access, all of which will add significant monetary costs and time delays to this project, further exacerbating the overcrowding issues that all of the counties are facing. You've heard that roads in Arkansas are all the same and that access won't be a problem. On the contrary, RDOT says the roads will require major improvements at a minimum cost of $500,000 per mile. And the Director of Division of Building Authority has twice emailed her colleagues, noting that the site is not viable, specifically citing access issues. You've heard for 2 years that a 3,000-bed facility will cost $470 million, despite the governor's office being told in writing in December of 23 that this budget will never deliver 3,000 beds. Then over a long weekend in the middle of session, a California consultant morphed that figure into $825 million. This is the same consultant who noted in text messages that they needed to, quote, develop messaging about budget concerns to protect the governor. There are a litany of similar examples, but we don't need to beat a dead horse here. So let's talk a little bit about the government's role in all of this. The voters in Franklin County voted overwhelmingly Republican in the last election cycle and have done similarly for some time. By doing so, their impression was that they had helped to install a small government rooted in fiscal conservatism, practicality, fairness, and respect. Instead, they face an administration that has charged full steam into a capital improvement project with less than 10% of the funding needed to finish the project. They face an administration that's in the business of choosing winners and losers, clearly indicating that it doesn't matter how many generations you've been here working the land, paying your taxes, and being an upstanding citizen, the state can always just decide that now you have to share a razor wire fence with a mega prison. An administration that operates admittedly behind closed doors, shielding its actions both from the public and their representatives, hiding behind half-baked excuses about bidding wars and being good stewards of taxpayer money. And an administration that consistently politicizes and denigrates its citizens' legitimate concerns about the impropriety surrounding this project. Despite being labeled as radical leftists, our concerns being dismissed as mere NIMBYism, and our community being compared to pretty deplorable South Park skits, our leaders' disparagement of us will never make this project either viable or fiscally responsible. We believe the legislature knows this, and that's why it refused to fund the project 5 times. Unfortunately, neither a lack of funding nor the plain facts surrounding the site's unsuitability have stopped the steamrolling. This project represents the height of government overreach, and what's especially concerning is that the executive branch has ignored the legislative check and balance, your check and balance. The legislature's power of the purse has been disregarded by trudging ahead with a project without enough funding to build 300 beds, much less 3,000. This is a government ruling with an iron fist in complete disregard for the people who elected it and who it is intended to serve. This is not the type of governance that Arkansans consent to. Look, we don't want to sit here and throw stones all day without bringing reasonable solutions to the table. First and foremost, this project needs to be scrapped. Shortly after the governor announced the purchase of this property, residents offered to buy back the land so the state can move on to a more appropriate location. No harm, no foul. While the governor declined the offer at the time, it remains on the table, and given what we all now know about the feasibility of this location, it should be an appealing offer. Take the easy out. Stop spending before we end up $50 million in the hole like South Dakota, or worse, $75 million short for the shovel-ready expansion of Calico Rock's North Central unit. That expansion of 500 beds, supporting by existing infrastructure and a viable workforce, would provide immediate overcrowding relief rather than perpetuating uncertainty and wasteful spending, and all at about half the per bed cost of the current plan. It would also leave ample funding left over to consider a myriad of other solutions, from smaller regional facilities to investments in education, public safety, parole reform, and programs aimed at curbing recidivism. Investments that address the root of our overcrowding issues rather than just applying a billion-dollar Band-Aid and kicking the can down the road. We need to recognize that a mega prison just logistically doesn't work in this state. Arkansas is a rural state and needs to be treated like one. If all the experts who spoke earlier today are correct, and we have no choice but to open additional bed space, we're obligated to do so in a manner that will actually be effective. Reallocate the funds back to Calico Rock. It's the only facility ADC can fully staff and could provide overcrowding relief in a much more manageable time frame than the 4 years at an absolute minimum that it will take to move inmates into the proposed Franklin County facility. We could sit here all night, and we've all been here long enough, and talk about the facts and specifics of all the things that are wrong with this specific iteration of the project. But out of respect for everybody's time, I'll finish up with this. Please don't misconstrue our obstinance for baseless opposition. I can assure you that we're driven by a genuine concern, a deep love and respect for both our local communities and our state, and a desire to prevent our government from repeating mistakes that have cost other states dearly. We're not standing here as obstructionists in the way of progress. We're here as Arkansans who value the integrity, transparency, and accountability of our government. As Arkansans who know that every tax dollar spent on a flawed concept of a project is a dollar lost for education, for infrastructure, for public health, and for opportunities for future generations. In light of all this, we would urge you to use your positions as representatives of the people to help steer the ship away from the impending wreckage. Find a reasonable, responsible solution to the state's carceral problems before it's too late and the albatross around Franklin County's neck becomes the shared burden of every Arkansan. Thank you for sticking around to listen to me, and I'm happy to take any questions if you have any.
All right. Any questions for Mr. Watson? Seeing none, thank you, Adam.
Thank you.
We're gonna then these next few, because it's almost 6:30. We're gonna limit the time to 3 to 5 minutes. So we've lost a lot of our committee. But those of you who are willing to come up and speak, you'll have 3.
Okay. Which one? Does it matter? This one? Okay. Hi there. My name is Natalie Cadena, and no, is it on? Oh no. Okay. Now can you hear me? Okay, that's better. My name is Natalie Cadena, and I am representing the citizens of Franklin County. I'm a former resident of Franklin County, and I came here with some prepared notes that I'm not even going to look at. What I've heard here today is a lot of problems. We have a funding problem. We have a crime problem. We have a lot of problems. And what I haven't heard is how a 3,000 bed facility on Mill Creek Mountain is going to solve any of those. So I'm going to keep this incredibly brief. I would like to point out one thing that I wish for the legislators to consider as we go forward, and that is I'm an educator, specifically a special educator, and I just put a 6-year-old in a facility long-term. And that's not uncommon in schools right now. So I've heard that men and women in jail don't have any, way to get help not repeating their crimes, and these are their kids. I have a photo on my desk that came across yesterday from our SRO of a felon who is after his children. His children are now enrolled in our school district, and they are trying to get away from him, and he's found them everywhere that they've been. These kids are going to go straight into the system. So this money that we're talking about putting into public safety has got to start somewhere different than what we're talking about now. And my remarks that I had planned, were pretty much about site suitability and things like that. We have every ounce of data that you could possibly want on our website. The things that we have put out in opposition to what we think is a misuse of tax dollars is all there for you to read, and it's all there for you to look at. But I heard a lot of stuff here today. I learned a little bit, and I'm, thankful for those of you who are choosing to sit here and listen to the rest of us. I feel a little bit disrespected by those that didn't, frankly. However, I'll just leave it with this. Franklin County, we're not a group of people that are unreasonable, and we never have been, and that's not what this has been about. And I think you heard Adam clearly justify what our position is. So I just want you to take that with you, consider it, consider the alternatives that are here, and what that $1 billion could do for public safety if we don't spend it all in one spot. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else?
My name is Ronnie Young. Is it this one?
Yeah, turn it on.
My name is Ronnie Young, and I'm a lifelong resident of Franklin County. Thank you for allowing me to be here. I'm not going to argue that we don't need a prison, but what I'm going to tell you about is a little snippet of my life. I grew up on Mill Creek Mountain. My brother and I will be the 4th generation of farmers to farm that land. When I was 12, my dad told me that I was going to be his little shadow, and I was. He woke me up every morning to milk at 3:30, and I milked every afternoon at 3:30 when I got off the bus. It was not an option. I was to change my clothes. I was to do it. My punishment when I became a teenager, if I broke curfew, was to pick up rocks, because that land grows rocks. When we learned about the prison, my dad immediately said, how are they going to build a prison on a pile of rocks? And there's not water. And we all know that water is key. My parents have chose to live here because it's remote and it's quiet. But let me tell you a little bit about the remote and the quietness. In 2024, I had to call 911 for my dad. I was on the phone with 911 for 22 minutes. 22 minutes. I had to send my brother to the end of my parents' driveway because my parents were robbed in 2008. and it took the police 2.5 hours to find them. And I knew if we didn't send somebody to the end of the road, they would never find us. The paramedic later confirmed that. When we followed the paramedic out to go find AirVac, another ambulance from Lavaca was sitting there because my parents' driveway is on the Franklin-Sebastian County line, and Lavaca is in Sebastian County. Lavaca couldn't find my parents' house, and GPS didn't take them there. So I've often worried about my parents' safety. Nobody should have to wait 22 minutes for emergency personnel to show up. But that's how it is out there. But people choose to live out there because they love that remoteness. They love the quiet and they love the freedom. I learned about the prison build the day before that the governor announced it on KDYN, and I immediately called my dad because I was in disbelief. We weren't asked. We've lived there all of our lives. We farm there. We love it there, but we have no choice in this. And if anybody would have came and asked any one of us, we would have told people there's not water there. It's solid rock. You're gonna have to dynamite, you're not gonna be able to build it. I guess you can if you pour enough money into it. But then the taxpayers are paying this. And that's not fair to them. So I want to thank you for those that stayed to listen. Thank you for allowing me to speak. You know, I'm not a political person, but I fight for my family, and I watched my dad work 16 years without a vacation. He worked sick. He would make himself bleed. He led by example. He didn't have a say-so. And that's not right. Thank you.
Committee, any questions for Ronnie? Ronnie, thank you.
Thank you.
Cody, you want to come up? Sure.
I've had enough. Do you turn it off, Ronnie? I should know how to work this. Should be a green button. Lord help me. All right, it's going to work. Thank you, Senator. I've sat here long enough. I've thought what I was going to say. I've got a whole iPad I bought, just putting stuff down there, but I'm going to get up here and just tell you, it's public input. I've been a JP for almost 6 years, right around that time, and I used to beg for public input. It let us know exactly what the taxpayers had on their mind and the way we're spending their money. And never was more nervous time when somebody got up and started letting us have it, because being in charge of tax dollars was my biggest stressor the whole time I was in that position. But I live there. I live on this place. Our family land borders this property where the state bought almost a half a mile or even longer. My dad is 83 years old. We're all raised there. There's 25 members of my family from 83 years old down to the grandkids that live there still to this day, hunt and fish, explore, and what I call living the American dream with a little bit of cross into the countryside of things. The thing that probably set me back as much as when the governor made this announcement on the radio was I didn't know anything. I couldn't believe that this had happened. My family's calling me. All of a sudden, people are questioning me now that used to trust me. I called the county sheriff. I called the county judge. I called Senator John Eubanks and Representative Eubanks and Senator Stubblefield was the last one I called. I still to this day cannot wrap my head around how we had no public input on this. how we had no say-so. This mega prison going in our backyard, and we had no say-so. And I'm maybe, you know, we were told they were keeping it quiet to keep from a bidding war or something. And folks, I'm gonna tell you, that's junk. That's junk. I want to get up and ask, before everybody left, the other county judges and these other sheriffs who I have the most respect for now after I've been in this position. But how would you feel if you just woke up and on the radio the next morning they say, hey, we're building a 3,000 bed correctional facility right there on your backyard. It's a barbed wire fence that borders our property. And I don't want to talk so much about my family. It's just the people that I represent or used to represent in Franklin County. I feel there's a lot of pressure on us coming up here today. I appreciate you giving us time to talk, and there's been some great dialogue. I mean, when we stop talking about things, that's when the trouble hits. I'm glad that we've had this opportunity, but a bunch of the points have already been made. Senator King and yourself have all been open to us. The Board of Corrections has been open to us. We haven't found very many people that won't visit with us and to learn more about it. I think one thing I want to iterate is this land is on a rock. Now I know with enough money you can build anything and bring water from anywhere, but my family's lived here. My dad's lived there his entire life. And if an old timer tells you something, or that old saying, when you see somebody whittling an apple with a pocket knife, you need to listen to them. And Ronnie's dad, my dad, several other families that border that prison land up there will tell you the same things. You're not going to get it. If you're going to get it, you're going to spend more money than what you got. And I just like to leave that thinking we can do all this stuff, but at an astronomical amount of tax dollars. And I like what Senator King he has some good numbers for you. I mean, you just need to listen. We need to put bad guys behind bars. I sympathize with these judges and these county sheriffs. I worked with them for the last many years doing this stuff. I didn't know a lot about it, but it's needed. And I think we need to come to a decision together. Like Ronnie said, I've heard a lot of solutions today, but nothing about this prison going to be in Franklin County is going to help any of it. And I do thank you for your time, and I really thank the ones that stayed here to listen to this public input. Thank you.
Thank you, Cody. Anybody got any questions? All right.
I was going to say good afternoon, but I guess it's good evening now. So, good evening. My name is Lee A. Coach. I'm a resident of Rogers, but I am a native of Peter Pender, Arkansas, which is just east of the site. I'm the 5th generation of my family to come from that area of Franklin County. In fact, my great-grandfather has a prairie natural area named after him, A.G. Flanagan. But you all would probably know him better as the father of our former First Lady, Betty Flanagan Bumpers. That location is about 3 miles as a crow flies to get to his prairie natural area. So we've been there a long time. My family helped settle this area. Collectively, they've owned thousands of acres near the site. Now, most of that has since changed hands. I remain very connected to the area, and that's why when Natalie called, I was happy to volunteer and help the Gravel and Grit oppose this prison construction, and that's why I'm here today. While my Uncle Dale gave me a natural interest in advocacy and governance, my professional career has given me deep insights into the expectations and behaviors of the Arkansas workforce. I spent the bulk of my career working as a vice president of human resources and safety for an Arkansas-based company that has locations throughout the state. I also worked in the construction industry, so I have access to those experts. The past 5 years, I've been spending part of my time consulting with an excavation firm. I say that to say I'm not here only as a native of Franklin County. I'm also here as an Arkansas taxpayer to speak against this poor site selection and the long-term burden it will place on generations of Arkansans to come. Part of the site selection criteria called for close proximity to a U.S. highway, 2 miles specifically, very good criteria. Adequate land for construction, also it needs to be build ready, and necessary infrastructure to support the facility. all of which this site fails to provide. The closest interstate exit is 22.6 miles away in Ozark. Fort Smith and Van Buren are even further. We already know this will require extensive road repairs that RDOT estimates at $500,000 per mile. And keep in mind, that will not be a line item on your construction budget. The site lacks adequate access to water and sewer infrastructure. A facility of 3,500 people will overwhelm the region's capacity. And that's going to require the costly infrastructure we've heard discussed this evening. And that's likely in the hundreds of millions of dollars. Again, those costs will not be a line item on your construction budget. So for the state to accomplish its goals of being on time and within budget, having a site close to build ready is going to be critical. In an interview on December 5th of 2002, an official put the price of the facility at $750 million. Long-term construction inflation typically will double your consumer price index. So I made some assumptions and built a model. So assuming the producer's price index annual inflation of 4.7%, if you break ground on June 2026, assuming a 3-year build for the complex to be completed, you would be midpoint of construction in December of 2027. That will put your project cost, using that $750 million that was estimated in December of 22. That makes this project's cost right now $956 million. And that's if everything goes to plan. And I assure you, ladies and gentlemen, it will not go to plan. The land itself presents significant challenges. To build here, you're going to have to move a massive amount of rock. Presently, mass rock removal is running around $195 per cubic yard. Trench rock work is running $275 per cubic yard. For a typical cut and fill work, you should be paying $18 to $25, not $195 per cubic yard, not $275 per cubic yard. They will execute that rock clause in that contract. So, some of you may be contractors and developers. You know as well as I do that your site will make or break your project budget, and this site will break it. Onion Creek also runs through the property, complicating your value engineering solutions that you could use, adding environmental risk, especially when we know there are critical and endangered species that have already been documented on the property. These issues will inflate costs and create lasting liabilities for the Arkansas taxpayer. Now, once it's constructed, the site is going to present a new problem, and that's the workforce. Corrections is an industry that already struggles with recruitment and retention. This is a remote site, and that will only compound the issue for the Department of Corrections. A decent commute is essential to attract workers into a correct carceral facility. And the corrections officials have testified to you all about that many times. But this location will provide it. Research into the corrections industry shows that Arkansas, much like the rest of the nation, is facing a severe labor shortage, especially in rural facilities. The state did not conduct a proper workforce analysis. They obtained a baseline formula, and then they plugged in some population data. That's ignoring the very real challenges of recruitment and retention in a competitive labor environment. Dana Solar, who is here this evening, another generational native of the area and an HR professional, just published an article this week. She did an analysis of the 5-county region they proposed to recruit from. There are 4,000 unemployed individuals and 10,000 open positions. That's a deficit of 6,000 people already. Now, add to that, you're going to have obvious overlap in law enforcement recruitment and corrections recruitment, obviously. That's pretty natural. Look at the situation we are in today with the recruitment of law enforcement, and we're going to be cannibalizing that because we don't have exceeded skill on that.
Well, I hate to cut you off.
I've actually got like one more paragraph when I'm done.
Okay.
Yeah. So, that's not a formula for success. That's a formula that results in higher turnover and costly mandated overtime. And that's going to drive up the taxpayer costs even more. So this site doesn't meet their own criteria. It's remote, under-resourced, and will require hundreds of millions of dollars in unforeseen costs. As stewards of public trust, It's your duty to ensure that our tax dollars are spent responsibly. And I urge you to halt this project, to require a full reassessment of the plan, and to protect Arkansas taxpayers who will be shouldering the weight of this faulty decision for generations. I do thank you all for your time, and I thank you for your service to this state. It's not easy doing what you do. So,
Hey, Leigh, thank you.
thank you.
Any questions? Seeing none? Will you identify yourself for the record?
Thank you, Senator Stubblefield and members of the state legislature. Thank you for being here at this late hour this evening. I really appreciate this discussion. My name is Sarah Moore. I'm the Executive Director of the Arkansas Justice Reform Coalition. I'm a lifelong Arkansan. Importantly, many individuals that I know and love suffer from mental health, addiction, and recovery needs that oftentimes are met by arrest and incarceration, which has put their lives in jeopardy. One of those I know and love, unfortunately, died in the Washington County Jail, Brianna Danielle Evans, in November of 2024, and that is still under investigation. I've heard it mentioned the need for these beds, and I don't think we have a need for these beds. I think that we have discussed that we don't like the outcome that's happening across the state with the situation with the beds that we have. And the definition of insanity is to continue to do the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. We currently know that when we lock people up in the same way in the facilities we have today, that we have the same level of recidivism and have concerns about the growth. We saw the projections today. But if we change policies and we address this in a different way, we have the ability to have a more positive impact on our communities. When we're talking about criminal charges, and we've talked about Arkansas being the #3 incarcerator in the nation, across the nation, crime has actually been going down. And since 22 to 23, we actually saw crime charges in the state of Arkansas go down 5%, and 23 to 24 down 8%. And these are from the Arkansas Criminal Information Systems, which is audited by the FBI. We know that crime charges are going down, but yet we're still locking up as many and more people, and we're not liking the results. And so there was some testimony earlier you heard about some programs that we invest in that work. You heard from Lonoke County Sheriff about the PACT program. That's a 74% effective rate. We heard, and I appreciate the beds that have been invested in for reentry. We know that whenever 90% of folks are going to go re-enter into the community. And there was a recent meta-analysis that showed that reentry programs can reduce recidivism by 62%. Instead of spending $1.5 billion on a prison, what about a fraction of that cost going into meaningful, more robust reentry services? Additionally, there was the talk of long sentences. The evidence base out there, long sentences do not correlate with reducing recidivism or those repeat offenders. It doesn't have an impact on whether or not someone potentially commits another crime. And then we've heard from our AG, Tim Griffin, that we have a parole problem. I agree with him, but I disagree that we let a lot of folks out. The opposite actually happens. We see it oftentimes in working with families in our organization, that individuals are doing everything they're supposed to do, they're at correct classification, they go before the parole board and they get a 1 year or 2 year deferral. Individuals oftentimes take deals in the county jails and they're told your time served is going to allow you to go down and immediately parole out. But what commonly happens is when they go down, they get the 1 and 2 year deferrals. I saw, the chart that we talked about that we, are no longer doing those early releases. And then I heard some discussion that came from the Secretary Wallace in regard to looking at being able to do our release dates directly from county jails. I really hope that we'll look at those types of solutions and that many different levers that we can pull together will reduce the need for these additional beds, because taxpayers are not interested in paying for them, as we've heard. I'm from Northwest Arkansas and was part of the taxpayers who voted against additional jail expansion.